Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 17th of November 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish, with me in studio, Mike Robinson. Well, it's Thursday today, but we're going to be joined by David Scott from Northern Exposure, who will be talking or discussing the wider news, but also telling us a little bit about what's been happening north of the border. We understand Perth's got sunshine today. The rest of the UK has got a bit of everything. It's dry, it's cold, it's warm, it's wet, it's windy, it's mild and calm. So life in the British Isles, and that's the British Isles without a comma. We'll be discussing that more with David Scott in a minute.
Well, the big story of the day is, of course, fake news that's been building and building over the last couple of weeks. Los Angeles Times, their headline is "Want to keep fake news out of your newsfeed? College professor creates a list of sites to avoid." Of course, Vox gets in on it. This is Vice gets in on it. A list of fake news websites proliferating on Facebook is staggering. The Independent saying, here's a list of 133 websites that publish fake news. Metro saying, full list of fake news sites to avoid. So they are quite definitively calling some of these sites fake sites, which in itself might be considered a libelous statement. But anyway, we move on. Who's behind this list? Well, it's this lady, Melissa Mish Zimdars, who claims to be she is an assistant professor of communication at a university in Massachusetts. We'll come on to that in a second. She's got a PhD in communication studies, and she was previously an instructor of communication studies at the University of Iowa. So there you go, that's her. Now she has a blog, or rather she doesn't, because, mysteriously today it seems to have disappeared behind a username and a password requirement. So you've got to ask her for access to her blog. Particularly nice image that goes with her blog. So there you go. What can you say? So I thought, Brian, let's have a look on the Wayback Machine and see what it says. Unfortunately, it says that the page cannot be displayed due to robots.txt. Now, the robots.txt file is the file which notifies search engines what they can and can't do on a particular website. So I thought we'd have a look at that. And, indeed, that was changed to disallow all search engines last night at about 9:15 in the evening. So clearly she has responded to something. Perhaps she's responded to the response that she's got by posting this list. But we move on. Her Twitter page, well, it seems to have become protected. That's a shame. Her Instagram page, that is also private. And her Facebook page is also only for friends now. She seems to be doing a runner about as quickly as she can at the moment.
She's gone in the bunker.
Gone into the bunker, but unfortunately not quickly enough to avoid Google Cache. So let's have a look at her CV. She's got a PhD in communication studies at the University of Iowa, and that was expected in May of 2015. Well, she obviously has that now. And the dissertation was Weight Watching, the Global Circulation of Fat Television and the Obesity Epidemic. So that clearly qualifies you as somebody who can identify what is a real news story and what's a fake news story. Okay, and her Master of Arts in Media Studies, her thesis title there was "Where Can a Man Be a Man? Television Comedies and Post-Feminist Masculinity."
Right.
So this is great stuff. And about Mish on her blog, what does she say? "I'm currently an assistant professor to the Department of Communication Arts and Sciences at Merrimack College in Massachusetts. I received my PhD in Media Studies from the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Iowa. My current research primarily focuses on the intersections of television media studies and critical health / fat studies, looking specifically at issues of identity, the body, surveillance, and indiscipline." So, as I say, absolutely qualified to make decisions about what's real and what isn't. Many people have been contacting her, clearly. Her email address, if anybody's interested, is zimdar@merrimack.edu. And there's the address and telephone number of Merrimack College if anybody feels like attempting to get in touch at all. So let's just have a look at the list. So here it is: false, misleading, clickbaity, and or satirical news sources. So what she's tried to do is to mix what she says are false, misleading, and clickbaity articles with websites which are clearly satirical, like The Onion or Private Eye. Private Eye's on this list. And so is 21st Century Wire, as you will see. But you'll also note that there are quite a number of sites there marked in yellow, which says that, well, basically she has removed the site from her list, and in brackets temporarily. Now, there's at least one of the sites which was on this list that has publicly stated that they are seeking legal advice with a view to bringing a libel prosecution. So we'll see what becomes of that. But I suspect that those ones in yellow are as a result of that. Well, somebody has produced a handy Chrome extension if you happen to use Chrome as your web browser based on this list. So you can install an extension which immediately flags up that a website is providing fake news based on this lady's list. So all the mainstream media, this is the BBC, quiz, can you spot fake stories? BBC going nuts about fake stories. This is BBC News Beat for younger people. I write fake news that gets shared on Facebook, so they've got somebody bragging about it. But perhaps Vox explains why the mainstream media going such nuts about this at the moment. Of course, the Trump victory being blamed on this, but they have a graph on there which shows how the mainstream media engagement on Facebook is collapsing, whereas the alternative media is absolutely exploding. And this is pretty much the explanation for why this is going on. Of course, they're mixing in alternative media platforms that are attempting to do a good job with the ones that are deliberately pushing out fake news. I'm not for 1 second suggesting that isn't going on. But the list that she had produced was mixing quite serious websites in with some that were less so.
Yeah. But absolute panic here, Mike, isn't there? That all of a sudden, now that people are able to go on the internet, people are quite capable of making a decision about what they're reading. Desperation by the big boys, I would say.
Absolute desperation. And a number of points that are, of course, the issue of free speech. The fact that the mainstream media attempting to censor what's being discussed on the internet. And, of course, the danger of what are effectively monopolies, like Facebook, for example, is effectively a monopoly. So of course, if Facebook and Google choose to use this list or any other list that some indeterminate person has decided to compile as a way of censoring content on their platforms, that has a massive effect on free speech.
Yeah.
So, David, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm just looking down the list. This was news to me. I'm amazed to see that Huffington Post, Mike, is not on the list as fake news sites, despite announcing the 98.4% probability of a Hillary Clinton win in the presidential race. So that's not fake. But many sites that I visit and think extremely highly of, LewRockwell.com, 21st Century Wire, Zero Hedge. They're all on there, yes, it's a very crude attempt at a backlash from the mainstream media. It's amazingly crude, and it shows that they haven't learned anything.
Right. Well, let's move on to the next thing then, because I want to highlight this. The Media Fund financed the UK's media revolution. This is being run by a lady called Elizabeth. Sorry, I can't see her name there. Elizabeth Mizon. Who runs a film festival in Bristol, and she's attempting to set up a platform which will enable alternative news sites to join, and they will basically produce a platform, a single place where everybody can be funded out of. So they're attempting to build a crowdfunding platform, and everybody can go there and decide where their money's going to go. Now, who are the organizations getting involved in this? Real Media, Centre for Investigative Journalism, Radical Film Network, Navara Media, and so on. Now Then, Union News, Spin Watch, Pride's Purge, Street's Kitchen. These are the ones that have signed up for so far. Dorset Eye, Salford Star, Manchester Media, and so on. But the one that really stuck out for me was the second one on the list there, which is Open Democracy. Now here is the Open Democracy website. And I was really taken aback because when I looked at this website on Monday, the About page did not look like this. The About page did not have a support Open Democracy UK button, PayPal button on the right-hand side. And at the top of the page, it had a sort of sub-menu. So this is what it looks like at the moment. Let's go back a few days using the Wayback Machine and see what it looked like a few days ago. And this is what it looked like. And third on the list on the sub-menus, there is supporters. And the supporters page has completely disappeared. So let's just point that out. And let's have a look at who the supporters are. So our supporters, and they produce a useful graph showing grant funding, large individual donations, it's a pie chart showing the proportions, platform and editorial partnerships and so on. This is their finances situation. And let's have a look at their supporters. And you'll notice that the grant funding begins at a range of £1,000 to £10,000. And this is just full of foundation funding. So we've got the Jazz Fund, Lyman Miliband Trust, and so on.
Johnson Trust.
So then the next band is £10,000 to £15,000. Then we've got a £15,000 to £20,000 band. This is the sort of money that if the UK column with this sort of money, we would be doing.
It would transform things is the word that they would use, Mike. So transform look over the rainbow.
£20,000 to £25,000 band. They've got the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. That's the Reform Trust. They've got Rockefeller Brothers Fund providing them with money. In the £25,000 to £30,000 band, we've got
Esme Fairbairn.
Absolutely.
Key one.
Right. So and we get up to the top of the list, and the £100,000 plus donations are coming from the Open Society Foundation. So this is who is funding this organisation. And now they're trying to hide this information. Now, I sent them an email earlier on, which they have not responded to, surprise, surprise, asking them, have they removed this page because of the fact that they've joined this media fund crowdfunder? Now, I'm not going to criticise Elizabeth Maison because I don't know anything about her. I don't have any reason to doubt that she's doing this with the best intentions. But the point here is that if alternative media sites sign up to this type of operation where there's a central location for funding, if they then rely on that central location for funding in 2 or 3 years' time, when it's decided that the content that they're putting on their website is no longer appropriate, that funding can be withdrawn and people find themselves suddenly with nothing. And that is a real danger. There's no quick fix to this. Alternative media sites, in my opinion, need to build from being small and fund themselves and deal with small donations. Trying to organize this in this way is extremely dangerous. And when you have the likes of Open Democracy involved in it, it says to me that there's something else either involved at the beginning or attempting to co-opt what might be otherwise done with the best intentions.
Yeah. David, it's looking pretty obvious, isn't it?
It is, but again, I said earlier that it shows they haven't learned anything. These attempts to close people down are very often backfiring in the alternative media world, because there's two ways of looking at that list. That could be viewed, here's a list of the websites that the establishment doesn't want you to look at. So that's a very interesting list to have. And it can become essentially the best advertising for alternative media sites there's ever been, because it shows who has ruffled feathers. There's an old Winston Churchill quote about, does he have any enemies? Yes, well, good, that means he stood up for something. There's an element of that. In Scotland, there's one particularly toxic, in fact, not in Scotland, in Bristol, there's one particularly toxic nationalist who tweets under Wings Over Scotland. Right, and he produced a blocked list, people he will not talk to or listen to or have any interaction with. And he circulates this around the nationalists, and you can download the file. So you can block all the same people. So if you're a member of the Scottish nationalist cult, you don't have to have any awkward alternative views put in front of you. Now, that was very interesting. I'm number 407. You'll find a lot of people tweeting out of Scotland have numbers on their website, so we can recognise one another. And if you've not been blocked by this guy, that means that you've not really done enough. You have to try harder.
Okay, well, we're smiling. Of course, you know, this is a thorny issue, but there is a solution, and let's bring the solution up because the BBC has decided it is going to go into schools to teach children how to produce real news.
Good.
So this is pretty simple stuff. So let's have a look at what they're doing. Basically, you can join our mailing list to receive emails about the school report. And I'm just going to highlight that because I wonder if any of our viewers or listeners might like to email schoolreport@bbc.co.uk just to say what you feel about it. They're going to have a head teacher partnership agreement. It's all going to be good, and you can return that. Dedicated web page, news day, arrange for a newsmaking activity to take place in your school. This was 10th of March 2016. So, right, you know, we shouldn't worry at all because the BBC's got it in hand. They produce accurate, reliable news, except when, of course, it's a complete fabrication, and they're going to get in. And what is also interesting in the schools report system is that they've got quite a big section on child protection and how everybody's going to be properly screened. Actually, I think I'd be a bit wary about letting the BBC into my school. Well, what's the solution as to what's going on? It is for people to really understand how it works. So we're getting very close to Saturday, November the 19th in the British Constitution Group Conference. We are going to be talking about the state of this country. It's now a lawless state. This is quite clear. Many people suffering. I've just inserted a Telegraph article there. Dementia suffers left to starve or live on biscuits in harrowing cases. I have to say that we have case after case being reported to us of very serious neglect and abuse within the NHS, and particularly deaths of elderly people. So the NHS is going to be one of the topics we will be talking about, and I've just highlighted there a lady called Kay Woodward is going to be talking about reasserting the NHS constitution. So many people aren't aware the NHS even has a constitution. It does, but what we can certainly see is that constitution is being breached on a daily basis. And if we just go to the afternoon session, I should have given you an arrow, David, because down after the break, we've got 1720 to 1740, who are we the British? There was a scurrilous rumour that there was a misplaced comma in that headline, but I've looked and I can't see it. David, would you like to just tell us, just give us a little taster of why you think it's so important to talk about who we all are, the people that live on these islands?
Yes, we have seen initially an intentional attack on the confidence of people in this country to feel that their history, their culture, themselves have worth, and to develop the best aspects of that. It's in part the sort of Soviet idea of demoralization. It's in part the Western and Gramsci idea of removing the foundations from a society by attacking its culture, its families, its institutions, and leaving it with no ability to resist, in his case, the communist ideals. But we're seeing the effects of it. We're seeing people who have no ethical an intellectual ground on which to fight, and that's what we need to remember and to rebuild, so that we have something to defend and some ground on which to stand.
David, this is just briefly. This is something, of course, that isn't just being seen at an intellectual level in Britain. It's being seen at a literal level in other cultures, and particularly Libya and the other parts of the Middle East, where they're literally bombing the culture to bits. But it's basically the same approach, isn't it?
Oh, it may well be. The issue in Britain. I had I caught Donald Sutherland, the actor, lamenting the election of Donald Trump, and he was saying how he was ashamed to be male and white, and he was ashamed because Helen Mirren had told him to be ashamed, and he duly was. And the lack of any intellectual ability to resist, the lack of any critical thinking abilities there was simply outstanding. Why would he think like that? Why would he roll over like that? It was very, very strange, and this is the sort of surrender that it breeds.
Yeah. Okay, well, excuse me, an advert here for your meeting in Glasgow on the 30th of November. And you've got a couple of guest speakers there, obviously Robert Greene and the Dochertys. We're going to talk about the Dochertys in just a moment. What would you like to tell us about this meeting? I know that the other meetings that you've held up in Scotland have been a really great success.
They have been. This is at the West, which is a pub next to Glasgow Green. It's a bigger venue this time because we were a bit squeezed when we met up in Dunblane. We were a bit tight for space. The intention is that we get Robert Greene as a speaker. Now, Robert does have some illness within his family that means that there is a possibility that he might be called away at short notice, but absent that, he'll be there. And I'm very interested to hear what he's got to say. He's been talking about the Docherty case at several meetings in Manchester and London, and he's despite everything else that's going on in his life, he's managed to do some sterling work on behalf of the Dochertys. So he'll be updating us on that. Now, it was our intention to have Brian Docherty there because we'd made lots of arrangements, which we'll cover in a wee moment, to get things sorted for the Docherty family so that they could also attend. We don't know whether that's going to be possible now because we haven't heard from them again for several days, and the arrangements which we'd made, they've not been able to fulfil. So we again don't know where they are, and there's much doubt and from our point of view, much concern about them once again.
David, we've obviously had a lot of people asking for an update, not least because people have been donating very generously to try and help the Dochertys. Just, if you will, just give us a little bit of background into what happened. Obviously, the Dochertys wanted to stay in Ireland because that's where the children are, or they believe the children are in Ireland. They have no real knowledge as to where their 4 children were taken. But their logic as parents was we need to stay as close as we can to our children. So that's why they were there in Ireland. But then literally they disappeared off the plot. You'd been to see them. They obviously needed support, but then they disappeared. Just give us a little bit of a recap of how things have unfolded.
Yes, I went across to see them, and they were, I would say they were under more pressure and more stress than they had been at the previous time I'd seen them. We did a few interviews, we gathered some information, and I managed to persuade them to decide to come out of Ireland. Up until that point, they'd always been, no, we have to stay here. There's court hearings. Even if we don't attend, we're in the town, we're there, we're as close as we can be. We need to stay because of the children. So the things had got so bad that they would suggest, okay, we realise we need to come out and seek some support in the UK. Now, thereafter, there was a long communication break. I got nothing from them. And then we'd organised a safe house, but unfortunately the person whose house that was themselves fell seriously ill, and I had to put that back a short fortnight before we could actually have somewhere for them to stay. So communication was very, very intermittent, and then there was a full month where we had no communication from them at all. And the only means we have of communicating is via email. So we're depending upon them answering emails and answering messages. So after a month, we got a call. Now, at this point, some of the money was coming in from 1 or 2 people. It was immediately before you put the appeal out, actually, but a few people had donated some money in any event. So we got a call, and things were extremely grim. They hadn't eaten in 6 days. They were clearly living, I imagine, in the car or rougher in some way. They had no shelter and they had no food. So we were able to immediately get them shelter and get them food, send them some cash so that would happen. We then got another appeal for further help because they felt that with they were in a bed and breakfast, but they felt that the animals were being attacked in the car at night, so they needed to get somewhere more secure, and suggested a bed and holiday let. So again, we were able to help there, and we got them a holiday let for a week. Now, at the end of that, they were meant to be coming to the UK. And what happened then is I got a very strange phone call from the holiday let people. There was clearly some dispute going on. It was all very confused. I tried to speak to the Dochertys via this phone call, didn't manage to do that, all apart from briefly to Janice, but didn't manage to get any messages to where they were coming. Now, I had been intending to go over and literally pick them up, but they'd said not to come to Ireland because they were being followed, and they were going to come to a UK port, and I would collect them from there. But I never got any information as to where or when. So I kept asking, and we still haven't had any communication. So at the moment, we're again out of communication. We had set up a lot of things to help them. We had a very generous woman had opened her home to them, so we had a safe house, we had shelter, warmth, and food for them while they got a chance to recover. We had intended that they be speaking at the conference in Winchester and at the meeting in Glasgow, and we'd also organised a radio interview with them. So all of these arrangements are now at least in doubt until we hear from them, as we don't know whether they're in the UK or Ireland. I suspect Ireland because there was a care hearing this week concerning the children, and I suspect that is the reason that they've not felt able to come over to the UK.
David, when they were the last time they were out of contact, the reason for that, right, was that they, as you say, they're only communicating via email, and they had ended up damaging a laptop, which they got managing to get working again. Is that possibly what's happened again?
It's possible, but I mean, they've got a phone number. If they wanted to get in touch, I'm sure they could do that by a public phone box or something like this. So again, I don't know. I think it's more to do with they've now been under this sort of pressure for 2 years. It's extremely wearing. It's astonishing that they've managed to hold together as long as they have, because most people under this sort of pressure, they collapse one way or another. I think the fact that they've stayed together as a couple has been the reason that they have been so robust and durable under this pressure. But there is a limit to what anybody can take.
Yeah. David, I'm just going to add to that we will say is the UK column, but it's a group of people really have done a lot over a great many years to try and help people who've been under an immense attack by the British state, and usually in the subject of children. And the pressures we're talking about are absolutely huge. People become very scared. They go on the run. They try to get somewhere to hide. But of course, all the time there's, this immense psychological pressure, and individuals that we have dealt with have broken down under that sort of pressure at times. They will do things which to the rest of us sitting in our warm, comfortable homes is maybe not the most sensible thing to do. But of course, these people are living by their wits. They have to do what they think is the right thing at the right time, because of course they are the focus of this immense venom by the state. So whilst we are very concerned and disappointed not to have communication at the moment, this is not unusual in dealing with people who are in this immense position of stress. So I think what we're going to say nicely to all the people who have been kind enough to donate is just be patient at the moment. We are going to have to wait until we get communication restored, and then we can see where we are. Matters are out of our control at the moment. But what does it show? It shows, of course, that parents who simply report an approach of somebody who certainly appears to have some child abuse tendencies at heart, that's the way it appears, They report that incident, and they then have 4 children removed and are hounded not only by the Scottish state, but of course the Irish state. And we now know that the Westminster, so we'll lump England in there as well, is saying, well, we don't really care if a foreign state's taking your children. You're not going to get any help from us. As somebody in the chat room has said, I can't imagine what it feels like to have children taken away. To have 4 children taken away, you must go into a very, very dark place mentally to start off with, let alone all the rest of the pressure coming on, your home broken into, animals killed, pets killed. And certainly it seems that the dogs have been tortured with cattle prods. That was part of the story that came out. It's like something out of a horror film, but of course this is David Cameron, Theresa May's Conservative Britain in 2016. I don't know whether you'd just like to add anything to that, but
yes, and Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland, because Nicola Sturgeon is fully aware of this case. One of the things that we've been doing in preparation to accelerate the campaign on behalf of the Dochertys, anticipating that they would be in Britain with us and we'd be able to communicate more quickly with them and do more, is we're reviewing all of the documentation and getting all of the letters that have been written by the Dochertys over the 2-year period in order so that we could have a searchable database. So firstly, a huge thank you to the person who did that. It was a huge amount of work. The feedback I got from this person who had come later to the investigation team, looking at all these letters, she was struck by how coherent, accurate, funny, insightful, combative all the letters were. This was clearly people who were had very important cases to make and were making them with determination, with precision, with appeal to the requirements of lawful conduct, with humour where appropriate. I mean, they're excellent letters, and they've all gone in, and many of them have gone to Nicola Sturgeon and other senior people in the Scottish government, and they have been ignored. Even the letter from their 13-year-old daughter, which went to a senior person in the London governmental establishment, which was very touching. And she described her first-person narrative as to what she had seen surrounding this family. That too was ignored.
Yeah. Okay, right, David, thank you very much for that. To our viewers and listeners, we will, of course, update you on the Dochertys as soon as we can. In the meantime, we are simply going to hold the donations that have come in. We probably suggest the best thing is for people at the moment, if they want to donate, just hold until we know what the situation is. But we just pop this. Pop that one up on the screen, Mike. We are going to say that we are very, very concerned for the safety of the Dochertys at the moment, but our hands are tied until we get some more information. Okay, well, we'll move on through the news. I was going to say that we'll lighten things up a bit, but in fact, it's quickly going to show how bad things are in Parliament, but I couldn't resist popping this one in. This is a local Plymouth Herald story here, and it's saying that the Germans are looking to poach Plymouth firms after Britain pulls out of the EU. So I think in light of your report, Mike, we better label that real news or a scare story. But the story, if it is a story, is that Invest Region Leipzig has said that now we've declared Brexit, they can come and poach British firms. I wasn't sure there were any British firms left in Plymouth.
Not many.
Not many. And of course, the dockyard, which was the real fountain of wealth for all the firms and spin-off of all of the bigger work that went on in the dockyard, that is all collapsing very quickly. Well, somebody with an eagle eye noted that there'd been a Commons debate reported in Hansard. The subject was the East Anglian fishing fleet, and they thought we might be interested because Oliver Colville, our very own Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport Conservative MP, got a mention. But we had Peter Aldous, Waveney Conservative, begging to move. I don't know whether he wasn't able to move on his own or something, but he was begging to move. And he said, we need to have a consideration of the East Anglian fishing fleet because basically it's nearly obliterated, although it's been an integral feature of the East Anglian coast for nearly 1,000 years. And dear old Oliver Colville piped up and he said, does my honourable friend agree that this is not just about the East Anglia fishing community, it's also about other fishing communities such as mine in Plymouth down in the southwest, where they are very much hoping for better facilities in order to produce better fishing. Do they mean calmer seas there? I'm not quite sure what he means.
I'm not clear at all.
No, I'm not clear. So let's remind ourselves as to what happened to the fishing fleet. And David, especially for you, a BBC report going back quite some years now, the graveyard of the Scots fleet. And this, of course, is British fishing boats simply being cut up, hacked apart in order to meet the EU fisheries policy, and people literally crying over it. This gentleman, Paul Stewart, said it's more like bereavement. I'm going to a funeral. The vessel is my life's work. Now it's going to be cut up. The boat's 9 years old, but there's still all 20, 30 years life left in her. So perfectly good fishing boats cut up. And people said it didn't make sense, but of course it makes complete sense if the objective was to destroy British fishing industry. And to just show that that wasn't one report, we've got the Independent here talking about fishermen forced to scrap boats and cut catches. We've got this one, which was to do with quota hopping. So what's going on here is that Spanish and Dutch boats had signed in on our quotas, so they were basically taking fish allocated to Britain, catching it, and then taking it back to the markets in Spain and Holland. And all this carried on right under the noses of so-called British fisheries policy. Telegraph here, no end to the EU's crazy fishing policy. And it was Christopher Booker here pointing out that one super Dutch trawler was catching a mere 23% of the entire quota, but nobody wanted to do anything about this. And of course, from my own time in fishery protection with the Navy, I saw the demise of the British fleet whilst all of these super foreign boats came in. But what is Mr. Colville really concerned about? Well, it's not the death of the fishing industry, it's the death of the hedgehog. So I'd just like to introduce the madness of Westminster. Here he is with his poppy on, supposedly standing up for British veterans, whilst he does nothing as the dockyard, the fishing industry destroyed. But don't worry, because we're going to have a hedgehog summit, Mike.
Yes.
Is that like a molehill?
Possibly. I'm looking forward to it, though.
Okay, and here's the man. He's looking a little bit dreamy there, but that's probably because there was going to be a meeting between him and Liz Truss, who was then Environment Secretary. She said she was very willing to meet with Oliver to discuss his hedgehog issue, but she's now Lord Chancellor, so I don't know whether she's still into hedgehogs. David, madness in Westminster. Are these people mad, or are they deluded? Are they on substances? How do we explain this complete lack of common sense in our MPs?
That's difficult. Some are clearly incapable of thinking. Some of it's programming. It's minds being reframed through education and special courses. And some have just sold out. Some know what they're doing. And you get little glimpses of this, and they turn around and say, well, Mary Black, the youngest MP, said that she voted to remain within the UK, but had to hold her nose when she was doing it.
Wow.
Remain within the EU, sorry. She had to hold her nose when she was doing it. So that they know what they're doing isn't right. They know it's not in the best interest of the constituents, but they do it anyway because that's the job. Yeah. That's the party machine.
Deranged. Well, here's the serious stuff, and you were keen for us to get up this. It's on to the subject of the child sexual abuse inquiries north and south of the border. The Scotsman here reporting that expert has resigned from the doomed Scottish Historical Child Abuse Inquiry. This was Mr. Lamb, so he got frustrated and said the Scottish Government was continuing to interfere large and small ways, directly and indirectly. He said the thing needs to happen and you can't micromanage it. And Alan Draper, a spokesman for in-care abuse survivors, said Mr. Lamb's resignation was a devastating indictment of the government. And you also highlighted this one, which is your very own Mr. Swinney, is apparently going to update members of the Scottish Parliament on the child abuse inquiry. And part of that article said the inquiry has been dogged by problems from the outset, with the original chairwoman, Susan O'Brien, quitting the post in July, complaining of government interference. I've put in a subheading there, delay and obfuscation, the two friends of child abusers. What's your take on this child abuse inquiry?
Well, Mr. Swinney is going to stand up in the House in Holyrood today and make this announcement. The BBC are strongly suggesting that he is going to expand the terms of reference of the inquiry. Now, this has been one of the most dreadful parts of the Scottish inquiry because it was only residential institutions that were being investigated. So if you had day pupils and residential pupils in the same institution and they were both being abused, only some of them were covered by the inquiry. And it would also mean that many prominent cases, including the case of Holly Gregg, wouldn't be included because it wasn't a residential institution in which the abuse took place. So it was clearly a cover-up set of terms of reference, and it's been the subject of huge and consistent criticism from the survivor groups. So it may be the hint from the BBC is that it's going to be some improvement in that area, but we'll have to wait and see. The BBC article was quite interesting also in terms of language because they mentioned the Lamb, Professor Lamb said that the inquiry was doomed, but they didn't say why he said it was doomed, which is government interference. And the general tone was to make a certain amount of light or fun of the complaints that have come in from the former chairman and from Professor Lamb, who was one of the three people who ran the inquiry. So BBC again giving the government a bit of an easy ride on this, as they so often do.
Okay, well, we'll just give the inquiry south of the border a quick mention here with this one. Another senior lawyer quits. Now, I think, Mike, you mentioned this earlier in the week, but Eileen McColgan has resigned from the investigation due to concerns over its leadership. She's also a law professor at King's College London and was apparently involved in the inquiry's investigations into the Anglican and Catholic Church. Well, a classic example of abuse in the Anglican Church is the Kendal House scandal, where girls were abused over years, drugged unconscious and sexually assaulted. Church of England didn't want to do anything to reveal what was going on until they were absolutely forced into it by the work of survivors, Teresa Cooper in particular. But we're interested in the fact that even around the Docherty's case, there's mention of abuse, I'll say allegations of abuse, which run back to the Catholic Church. Over to you, David.
Yes, the resignation of Professor Lamb cited government interference to protect institutions which might be the subject of censure from the inquiry. Now, that was a bit opaque, but what I'm hearing is that refers to the Roman Catholic Church. So what we had was the Roman Catholic Church, who ran several institutions which have been already recognised as dens of paedophilia, have been pressuring the inquiry via the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government, acting on behalf of the Roman Catholic Church, has been pressuring the Scottish inquiry to do less or do things differently or downplay certain aspects of the abuse that has happened.
Yeah. Well, we shouldn't worry because Yvette Cooper has been brought in and she's currently running the inquiry into the inquiry.
Yes, because you do need that.
Yeah, because the child abuse inquiry south of the border has had a few problems. She says this is a really important inquiry into historic child abuse, and it's had a very difficult 2-year history so far. What's unclear is how much this has been about legacy problems, clearly personality issues, but whether there are also structural issues for the last 2 years and the difficulties they've had, or whether there are other ongoing problems for the future. It's all rather difficult to tell, but we've got an inquiry into the inquiry. Whether there will be an inquiry into that inquiry, I don't know. This is madness, David. What we are seeing is the state, north and south of the border, the same in Ireland, absolutely desperate to keep the lid on the subject of child abuse. And there can only be one reason: the establishment, the very high levels of political power and within the establishment are fully involved in the abuse of children. Is there any other explanation we can draw from this?
I don't believe there is. And we're seeing the same information, the same sort of patterns coming from Europe, coming from the United States, all surrounding the political elite and surrounding the abuse of children as a means of controlling those political elite by means of blackmail.
Yeah. Well, let's just bring in Harriet Harman, because somebody's ahead of us in the chat box. Great friend of Yvette Cooper, Labour colleague. She lobbied for rules on pornographic photos of children to be relaxed. She supported Liberty, the National Council for Civil Liberties, when it was linked to the paedophile organisations Pi and Pal. She's still there in the political circuit, and well, who knows? So let's have a look at Yvette Cooper. Always good to go to the Twitter page. Here she is. Of course, what's the hot topic for her? It's her fella is on Come Dancing and doing quite well, I believe, or not. So she's busy tweeting out that he's doing a great service for the nation by appearing as some dance comedian. Once she gets onto the subject of the Dame Lyle Goddard inquiry, here she is. Here's my response to the disgraceful refusal by Dame Lyle Goddard to give evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee. People get pretty tough. So somebody said, oh, come on, Yvette, ain't you got it yet? The establishment have rubbished this inquiry because the establishment were involved. So the public here are well on the thing. Stuart Ben Smith says, bit rich from you, who supported paedophiles along with Harriet and Pi. Well, that's an interesting statement. We've got Soren Hawkes. You weren't so animated about abuse in Rotherham. The British establishment will not be questioned or held to account, and still hasn't. We've got, this appears more and more like an establishment stitch-up, and it's just one of many inquiries kicked into the long grass. This is why they're frightened of people responding on alternative media, I think, Mike.
Absolutely.
So bring in the mystery businessman who's suddenly become president of the United States.
The Donald?
Yeah, it says the Ellen Times here, Aberdeenshire business owner wins presidential election, but they weren't sure who he is. Is that right, David?
Oh no, they knew who he was.
Oh, sorry.
They just preferred to, in his list of accomplishments, concentrate on the fact that he runs a business in Aberdeenshire, which is I thought was the headline of the morning from the day after the election. And there have been many interesting headlines and many interesting stories coming out here. I've got, to put it mildly, mixed feelings about Donald Trump. I must admit, I didn't have mixed feelings about Hillary Clinton. I thought she was completely corrupt and likely to start World War III. So, like many people, I was really extremely cheered by the fact that we were a somewhat safer world, and we see that relationships between America and Syria and America and Russia are already improving simply because of this election and the prospect of a different and more rational approach to foreign policy. Now, there are many other things to be concerned about with Donald Trump, and we'll watch carefully how he undertakes his presidency. But one of the things that's been striking me is the degree of both anger and simply confusion in the left-wing mainstream media in the States. They haven't known how to respond to this. They didn't see it coming. although I think we in the column were talking just before the election, and the view we formed was we thought that Donald Trump would just do this. The mainstream media didn't see it coming, and the reaction has gone from grief to rage and anger. And there have been enormous numbers of death threats. And I saw a sign of someone holding up a banner at a demonstration advocating the rape of Donald Trump's wife. Quite horrendous scenes. It shows you the degree of division in the country. It shows you the degree of just outright stupidity and hatred on the part of the people who are taking to the streets.
Yeah, I think one of the things that concerned me most, David, was that a youngster very close to me came home from school yesterday and was telling a friend that there had been people in the school, children in the school, suggesting that Donald Trump should be assassinated. And really, when 11 and 12-year-olds in a British primary school, British secondary school, are suggesting such a thing, there's a bit more to worry about than in terms of the general media coverage and how people are taking mainstream media at the moment.
Yes, there is. I mean, the essentially you had people in American mainstream media basically saying that it's Armageddon. It's the end of the world as we know it because people voted for Donald Trump. Have a look at your history. This is by no means the worst person that's ever been elected president. Not even close.
Yeah. Right. With an eye on the clock, David, we'll just bring this this subject in, which is back on the children mental health. Now, you flagged up that the TV in Scotland, I think it was BBC Scotland, had interviewed some ladies who've been working with this charity, Place to Be. Here they are celebrating our schools. I'd like to recognise the extraordinary contribution that schools make to support our children and young people's mental health. So schools are there to work with mental health. They've got a mission. I need my glasses for this. Our mission is to enhance the well-being and prospects of children and their families by providing access to therapeutic and emotional support in schools using a proven model backed by research and training. And our vision is a world where children have the opportunity to grow up with prospects rather than problems.
Good.
Well, who's the driving force behind this? Here she is, the Right Honourable Duchess of Cambridge. So we can relax because apparently she's very big on improving the mental health and emotional well-being of children in the UK. But David, you picked up on some comments from the two teachers. This was just the preamble. Yes, it was Laura Maxwell from BBC Scotland who was speaking to the ladies. These are some of the quotes. It's not just about PE and physical fitness, it's about mental fitness and about building that in all respects of our school day. They go on, we talk about physical health with them, but we also need to talk about their minds being healthy, and we come at it from a very simple approach. And attachment is probably one of the biggest challenges that some of our children face. I couldn't find a full explanation of that, but I didn't get a comfortable feeling about it. I think all children can benefit from the support of a counsellor, all children, some sort of emotional and mental well-being support, because everyone has challenges in their lives. It's not just areas of deprivation. Well, as Gillian was saying there, all children experience mental health issues. David, this is very worrying stuff. We've now got yet more people saying that children and just don't grow up normal. All of them are going to be disturbed. They're going to have mental health problems. And we have to cluster the state agencies around those children to protect them so that they grow up normal as far as the state's concerned.
Yes, so here you see the continuing professionalisation of childhood. Emotional support when you're a child, when I was a child, and for most children now, it's called mum. Families provide this, but no, that's not good enough. Families are now viewed as problematic or potentially toxic. So we have to have the state coming in there with the wonderful new programme. And when you look at the wonderful new programme, the bits of it that are correct are the most obvious mundane facts. Things like they talk about the growth mindset, right? So the growth mindset is if you feel positive about learning, you'll probably do it better. If you try harder, you'll probably succeed more. And if you fail, don't give up. Just it's just another challenge. Now this is not rocket science. This is simple folk logic that everyone used to know, but seemingly now you need a PhD to teach this. And the rest of it is sort of mumble jumble. But as it gets more professionalized, and as it gets more involved, you start to see these people who are qualified via university routes, learning things which may or may not be true, quite often aren't true, starting to have more impact on families and more involvement in families. The effect will be, I would suggest, an increase in mental health problems, not a decrease in mental health problems. There was this matter of mental health was discussed in the Scottish Parliament today at First Minister's Questions. The point was made that reports and references to mental health services in Scotland have gone up 50%. I don't know if that was in 1 year or a longer period. I didn't catch it, but 50% increase. To which the First Minister simply said, well, that just shows you, all these people are now seeking help and that's a good thing. So there's no realisation that a 50% increase might actually represent a serious and real degradation in the health of the nation.
Yeah. David, thank you very much. We're just coming up to the hour, so I think we're at the end of the news today. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, there you have it. If you're new to UK Column and you're concerned about real news, then our challenge remains the same. Please go away and research what we're talking about so that you can see for yourself that what we're showing and talking about is absolutely real and absolutely accurate. In the meantime, we will do our very best to see whether we can regain communications with the Dochertys. We are deeply concerned about their safety. If anybody's got information, please let us know. Now, tomorrow we're on the move for the conference.
There will be a news program. So tomorrow, Vanessa and I will present the news, and we will have a special guest on from Sana'a in Yemen. So tomorrow we're focusing on the Yemeni conflict. We'll have somebody on from Yemen, so stay with us for that.
Excellent. That's it. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.